Gerald was born on April 18th, 1927 in Frankfurt on Main in Germany. I'm Joyce Tapper, the interviewer. We're in Beverly Hills, California, United States of America, on January 26th, 1995. We're doing this interview in English. For camp, I want to hear all the...
Yeah, now the thing is, I could tell you a little bit of the background, which she didn't touch, of her uncle, why her uncle was... you already recording?
No, we don't want to hear about your uncle. We want to hear about you.
Why he was an elder in the camp, what happened there?
We really want your experience, and it's the things that you witnessed, and you... I was born
in Frankfurt on Main in Germany on the 18th of April 1927. I was the only child of my parents. I had a non-eventful youth there in Frankfurt, and when I was 6, I started going to grade school in Germany, which started in Easter time at those days. And I started in the first grade, and this was the year, 1933, when Hitler came into power. And my parents left Germany on the 8th of August, 1933.
Before you go on, tell me what your home life was like when you were a little boy. What kind of place did you live in? Who were your neighbors? What were your family, your grandparents, whatever?
Well, my grandparents had 3 daughters, and they each had a house right next to each other, an apartment building right next to each other. And we lived in that, in my mother's owned apartment building, had a flat there. And my grandparents lived next door. In there, they had a house too, I guess. So we lived there, and like I say, there wasn't much to say.
What did your father do?
My father was in arbitrage business, which means he was in contact with many banks and stock exchanges. As a matter of fact, when I was born, he had 50 telephones, all direct lines, because in those days there was no switching, and he had a big table with all these phones on there. And he knew which one was ringing. He was talking on several phones at the same time, making arbitraging deals. All this ended, like I say, when Hitler came into power.
And tell me about your mother.
My mother. She kept home there, and had a busy social life. She was born in Frankfurt. My father was born in the countryside, outside Frankfurt. But he studied at the University of Munich, and he studied at the University of Frankfurt, and got his Doctor of Jurisprudence there. But he never practiced law because he was in the banking and stock deal.
Were you aware of any anti-Semitism as a small child?
No, and I wouldn't have known what it was when I was 6. So
was everyone around you Jewish? Or?
No. Many, and I don't even know. But when I went to school, although Hitler had just come to power, when I went to school in April, I didn't notice anything. I wasn't aware of anything. But my parents decided to leave. And I went to Holland thinking, oh, in a few years this will blow over. This can't go on. That's why they went to Holland. Jews in Germany who left later, like 1938, they didn't go to Holland. They went farther away. They went to the United States or Uruguay, and were better off than me. We didn't go far enough. So in 1933, we went to Holland, and I went to school there again from first grade, which started in Holland, started like here in September.
What was your lifestyle in Holland?
Oh, we lived very comfortable in an apartment building right on the edge of town in Amsterdam, and I went to a private school.
A religious school? Or
No, it was a private school. It had the idea of, it was called the open air school. It had the idea of always having open windows in each classroom. It was very modern school, but it was a regular public school. And so I went there for 6 years, and it was a very happy time. I learned Dutch in a matter of weeks because it's very similar to German, and within a matter of weeks I could speak fluent Dutch.
Did you have a religious education?
No, I did not. And although I did not then, but although I became bar mitzvah just after the Germans invaded, it was scheduled for that time. Anyway, we lived in Holland, and we were undisturbed by things. We were disturbed by what was going on in Germany. I remember my father getting a phone call from his sister-in-law that his brother on Crystal Night was taken to Buchenwald. And that was the first real experience I had with that. He was in Buchenwald for a week or months, and then released.
How old were you at that time?
11.
And what impact did that have on you?
Well, I was very upset about it all. I was aware of what was going on in Germany because my father was, in Holland, was doing investment banking, mostly for people in Germany, Jewish people in Germany. And a lot of money from Germany was illegally shipped out through my father to the United States because Jews weren't allowed to take any money out of Germany. So sometimes somebody rang the front doorbell and I answered and I got a packet of money in my hand suddenly and they were gone. And so my father had to take care of things. I also remember as a boy how I used to take gold bars on the back of my bicycle to the central bank for deposit because my father felt that I wouldn't be watched where he might be. So I had them on the back of my bike in a little, wrapped up in a sack, in a parcel.
How did you feel? Did you feel secure or insecure at this time?
I felt very secure because people were thinking, well, Holland was neutral in the First World War, nothing will happen. As a matter of fact, we were in Switzerland when on vacation. We always went to Switzerland or Austria on vacation, and my father swore he would never set foot in Germany again, and we always had to drive all the way around Germany to get to Austria, all the way to Belgium, France, Switzerland to Austria. Anyway, we were in Switzerland when the war broke out. We broke off our vacation and rushed back to Holland, which was a big mistake. We left when the ultimatum, when the British made the ultimatum to immediately get out of Poland for Hitler. Hitler had attacked Poland, and the day we arrived back in Holland, the Allies declared war on Germany. So there we were.
Was your family part of the Jewish community in Amsterdam?
Yes, we went to synagogue occasionally, but we were not active. So my father always didn't want to go to the United States, but my mother said, we got to go to the States. My father said, no. Then Hitler attacked Norway. My father was a veteran of First World War, thought he knew military business pretty well, and he said to my mother, they can never keep up in Norway with these long supply lines. They'll be kicked out in 4 weeks. And the British did land in Narvik in Norway, but they got kicked out. So my mother said, if they're not out in 4 weeks, we go to the States. But it wasn't that easy. So when they didn't get kicked out, they applied for a visa to the United States, but we never got that till after the war. So there we were.
How did you feel at this time?
I was fairly young. I was 13, 12. I knew what was going on. And in the meantime, I knew the following. In the meantime, my grandparents had joined us in Holland from Germany. And what was more important, my uncle who had been in Buchenwald was smuggled. My father saw to it, he was smuggled across the border into Holland. Holland, under German pressure, wouldn't take any more German Jews under pressure. So he was illegally smuggled across the wartime border between Germany and neutral Holland, which was patrolled by the German army because they were at war. and smuggled across and into Amsterdam, where he was kind of in hiding from the Dutch. My father went to the chief of police and tried to get papers for him. He says, chief of police told my father not to tell him anything about it. He couldn't do anything, so he didn't want to hear about it. So they stayed there, and they got their visa, immigration visas to the United States just in time and got out on the last boat from Antwerp before the Germans invaded Holland and Belgium. All his furniture was lost and torpedoed on a ship which followed. So that was my uncle. So and we saw him every day, and he came over at night, and the Dutch police weren't really looking for him, but so I knew what was going on. So then the Germans invaded, and soon thereafter we had a visit from the Gestapo at home, because my father, who was also a correspondent of a Swiss financial newspaper, reporting on the stock exchange in Amsterdam. And he was sending twice a week, or however often, a telegram to Zurich from Amsterdam, and this telegram was in code. The reason for the code was not the secrecy, but to shorten the telegram. It wasn't long language, to shorten it. It had symbols. So the Gestapo, who was watching all the outgoing telegram, wanted to know what was going on, and they searched the whole house. And my father explained why it was in code, and they told him to stop it, so he had to stop sending telegrams. So that was my first run-in with Gestapo. It was almost immediately after the invasion. Shortly after that, the Germans started their anti-Jewish business. All the Jews had to register at Gestapo headquarters. And I remember standing in line, and in front of me was a Roman Catholic nun who had taken the oath of silence. She was there with her mother superior, and because she had 4 Jewish grandparents, she had to register. And I registered her. So that was the beginning of the war. Later on, in about late 42, early 43, the Germans started picking up Jews randomly. They called it razzias from the Italian word. They came by in a Gestapo, in a personnel carrier, truck with about 10 Gestapo agents in it, and they just fanned out and took any Jew they could get. By that time, we already had to wear the yellow star, Jewish star, and our personnel papers were stamped as a J for Jew. So they randomly arrested them and took their property and shipped it to Germany. I knew German mentality pretty well, and I knew what to do about that. When they had taken a family, they used to put a seal, Gestapo seal, on the door lock so nobody would enter anymore. I used to daily pry off these seals off the doors of people who had been deported. And at night, we had a little window in our front door through which you could inspect who was at the door. I reached through the door and put that seal on our door. So if the Gestapo ever came by, we were already gone. And so we survived all that business. And then my father started getting into trouble. There was a court action in Germany from somebody who had for smuggling money out of Germany. And specifically, they had found a letter my father had written to the Grand Rabbi of Antwerp about somebody who was stealing the money, who was offering to pay to smuggle it out of Germany to Belgium, and never paid it out, kept it. That letter was found, and this man was put on trial in Germany, actually, and my father was asked to be a witness in Germany at the trial, but he figured if he went to Germany, he'd never get out again. So he maneuvered things, so he was refused an exit visa out of Holland. But that didn't let on, and finally, I have a letter here, he got told by the court that he was fined 10,000 marks. Well, before that, we already knew what was coming. We went into the underground, went into hiding.
Tell me about that.
My father, my mother, and I took off our Jewish stars and walked out of Amsterdam. We didn't dare to go take a train out of Amsterdam. Walked out to a suburban train station outside of Amsterdam. It was about a 3 mile, 5 mile, maybe 10 mile walk. I don't remember how far exactly. And we went to a place in Lunteren, Holland, where we had been on vacation. And we stayed at a pension there. And this was May 43. And, oh, well, I should have told you before that I wasn't allowed to attend the high school, the normal high school in Holland anymore. Was forced to go to a Jewish high school, which was a long, long way into town. And we weren't allowed to have bicycles. They had to be turned in. They were shipped to Germany. I put a lot of sand in all the bearings of mine, so that nobody got much fun out of that bicycle. But I had to hand it in. And so I had to walk a long way into Amsterdam, to the center of Amsterdam, and we lived right on the outskirts to go to the Jewish high school. Anyway, that school, by the way, also was attended by Anne Frank. I knew Anne Frank. Not well. I just knew her. She was in a different grade than I was. My father was well known to Anne Frank's father.
You were about the same age, weren't you, as Anne Frank? Close.
No, she was a little bit younger. I was a couple of years old.
So.
She, her father and my father were both in the investment banking business and knew each other very well, before the war and after the war and during the war. And anyway, what I should have said, on the day of the invasion of the Germans, we saw the airplanes dive onto Schiphol Airport, the Amsterdam airport. We didn't at first understand what was going on, but they were dive bombing the airport. And then some parachutists, it was undeveloped land outside of us, ready for development, but not developed. And some German parachutists landed there, and we had Dutch army people in our living room shooting at them, at the Germans. Didn't come to much. And it was quite a shock to when the Germans came in. Anyway, like I say, I was forced into this Jewish school, and we just walked out of Amsterdam, took a train, and we had gotten fake papers before that. As a matter of fact,
how did you get the fake papers?
It's a tragic story, but somebody from the underground helped us get the papers. My father got a stolen identity card, a real one stolen, and his picture was glued in front of the other picture. So the fingerprint on it was the other man's, and my father's picture was artificially put in there. It was a fairly good thing. I have the thing here. The man who did it was arrested a week afterwards and shot, supposedly trying to escape. So we had these papers, and I got a certificate that I was registered under such and such name in the register in Amsterdam, and here we went.
What was your name?
My name was Gert Bongers. My father's name was Max Bongers. Bongers was the man whose ID was stolen. I had no ID, but only a paper that I was registered as Gert Bongers. And Bongers. That wasn't very good. So we then...
How do you spell Bongers?
B-O-N-G-E-R-S. That wasn't very good. And we then went to this place in Lunteren, and this was May. And my uncle and Aunt Anna joined us there later. My grandparents, in the meantime, went to the camp Westerbork. They had to all report, all the Jews, the last Jews in Amsterdam, had to report in. And they went voluntarily with their suitcase to Westerbork, and you know that story.
You want to tell us Westerbork? Go ahead and spell that for us.
W-E-S-T-E-R-B-O-R-K. That's in eastern Holland. So we went in the underground, and we thought at that time that women were not in trouble. Men were, because men were not allowed to be outside their city of residence. And our papers showed Amsterdam, so we weren't allowed to be outside of Amsterdam. So we hid if there was any danger, and we hid in the attic
Of this pension.
of this pension. The women did not hide, and there were other Jewish people there besides we and my uncle and aunt. There was another couple there. So, and as a matter of fact, we had a radio there, which is a little bit interesting. We were supposed to, the radios were supposed to be handed in, shortwave radios. We had a maid, a German maid in Germany, who'd been with my parents since they were born, since they were married, and she came with us to Holland, and she was a very, very nice lady and very attached to us. She was forced to leave us because German maids were not allowed to work for Jewish people. So she had to work in the German army canteen. And she bought the radio for us, the shortwave radio, in the German army post exchange. So while we were supposed to hand in the radios, we bought a new one from the German army exchange. She told us, and that's very interesting for your purpose, in 1943, early 1943, that the Germans were murdering the Jews, and we should commit suicide. That was her advice. So the Germans, who all claimed after the war they didn't know anything about it, she, working in the canteen as a waitress, had heard plenty talk about what was going on and knew all about it.
And did you believe her?
Yes, yes. That was another reason why we went in the underground. So, and many people did commit suicide, you know. So anyway, so we were kind of living like summer guests. We didn't go out. We lived there in hiding. The family had 2 daughters, and it is suspected that the older daughter went out with German soldiers and probably told them about Jews being at the thing. So one day they came and searched and asked for papers. We immediately went up in the attic, were hiding, and they never found us. But the women, their papers were not in proper order, so they arrested all the women. And my mother told you about that, how she was taken to jail and kept overnight there by the Dutch police, supposedly, were to watch her. They wanted her to leave, but she didn't. They left the cell unlocked, but she decided not to leave because she didn't want to get the Dutch police in trouble. The next day, the Gestapo came back to take her to Westerbork and the others.
And where were you and your dad at the time?
We took off immediately. We were hiding in the attic, and that's where we had our radio, which was hidden under a water tank, which was in the attic, which was carefully, it was a tongue-and-groove box around it, and two of the planks could be pulled out, and the radio was underneath it, because it was a death penalty for listening to the BBC. So, anyway, I mean, that's what we did all day long. And so we took off the next morning immediately and went back to another place where we had spent the summer. The name of the place was Huizen.
Spell that.
Huizen.
Thank you.
And there we met a man named Bert Bockhoven, who is recognized as a rescuer. He, and I have an article here in Los Angeles Times which describes.
You want to spell his last name?
Bochhove. He and his wife. His wife was a licensed pharmacist. They had a pharmacy down below, and they lived above it, and we lived there. And it wasn't just us; there were some other Jewish families there, and we lived up in the attic. And we had a hiding place which was very carefully constructed, so it was hard to find. We had they searched the house once, and we were hiding up there. And then...
Why did he do this?
Because he was a very kind-hearted fellow, for the good of his aunt. He came from a long family. He had his great-grandfather hit his brother, who was Napoleon's soldiers, were after his brother. They came and searched his farm, and the brother was standing on a bar in the fireplace, in the chimney, hiding, and the poor guy, his garter broke, and it was hanging down, and the soldiers saw this garter hanging out of the fire, on the fireplace, out of the chimney, and found him. So they had a long tradition of freedom, and in Holland it's very strong, very strong. So anyway, so he took us in, and then one day
were you still with your uncle? And
no, my
just
uncle had
you
gone
and your father.
separate, my father and me, but there were other people there, and we then went to. Then one day, he discovered that one of his employees down at the drugstore was stealing things, and he found a parcel when she went on vacation of the stolen stuff she had collected in the store, and in it he was searching it, a parcel, and it was a letter from the Germans saying they would pick up the Jews while she was on vacation. So we all had to scatter, and there came a day later. So we scattered into town, all of us, and my father and I were taken up by another family, in a grocery store. And we spent most of our time there listening to the radio. I listened to the BBC from 7 in the morning to 11 at night, and the American Forces broadcasting system. It was called Expeditionary Forces Broadcasting System.
What did you learn on the BBC?
Well, we had a map, and we kept track exactly where they all were. We never once listened to the German radio stations. Never once, wouldn't even tune them in. But to listen to the BBC and saw slowly how things were progressing and how we were liberated. And I remember clearly Eisenhower announcing the invasion, and we thought, oh, it'd be over soon. But it wasn't that quick, but they came.
And how were you provided for with food and so on?
That's very interesting. First of all, we lived in a grocery store. We were supplied with rationing coupons by the Allies, by the British. And that's a story. There was a fellow in Holland who had to engrave the plates for the rationing coupons, which were issued to the Dutch population. He engraved 2. One of them was shipped to England, where they printed them. And every Allied flyer who flew over Holland was given a set of rationing coupons in case he had to bail out, and if he was with a Dutch family, he wouldn't be. There would be enough food. Mm-hmm. So we got the same coupons, and as a matter of fact, we got them distributed for the Dutch population. We had our rationing coupons through the underground before the Dutch population. 1 month, they got wise to it. 1 month, we got caught. In the last minute, the Germans overprinted the regular ones with an overprint, and ours didn't have an overprint for 1 month because we had distributed too early. We had no rationing coupons, but we managed. We got stuff delivered by trucks from the underground. I don't know how they managed it. We did, and the next day they came and searched, and there was nobody there anymore. We found a new place in hiding, and we got closer involved with the underground, the active underground. They provided us with new papers. I got a proper identity card now, making myself a year younger, so I wouldn't be, if I was stopped, wouldn't be for forced labor, too young for forced labor. And I was now born in Surabaya, Indonesia, where they couldn't check, because in Amsterdam they could check. There was a central population register of all of Holland. Although the Dutch underground put the place on fire, and the Dutch firemen were extremely slow in getting there, and when they got there, they put the hoses in the fire cabinets and filled them with water. I think 1 or 2 firemen got shot for that. However, it was to no avail. There was a backup microfilm kept in The Hague. So that didn't help too much. So, like I say, I got a new identity card, which was in Gert Bongers, and born in Surabaya 1 year younger. To jump ahead a little bit, after the Allied, the British mostly, landed in Arnhem, which wasn't very far from us. We could hear the guns pounding and sort of flashes. But as you know, the Arnhem thing was not a success. And after landing in Arnhem, the southern part of Holland was liberated. We then changed identity papers again and had a letter from the police chief in Huizen that we were fleeing the Allied troops, and our identity paper got lost, and they had no contact with that community, so they couldn't verify, but they were convinced that we were from a village of Waals in Limburg. And my name now was Gerald Vermeulen, not Bongers anymore. We dropped that name. Gerald Vermeulen.
How do you spell Vermeulen?
Vermeulen. And I was 2 years younger, because the time had gone on and the danger was they were taken off to forced labor to Germany. However, we were hardly ever out on the day. Now we spent, like I say, I spent all day from 7 in the morning to 11 at night listening to the radio.
With your father?
With my father. There was a Dutch underground newspaper published, which gave all these facts. I don't know how it got, where it was printed, I never saw it.
What was it called?
Vrij Nederland, Free Netherlands.
Free Netherlands.
Which was also the name of the organization we belonged to. This organization also took care of downed Allied pilots who had bailed out and got them back across the lines to the Americans, to Allies. We had one pilot, which we successfully got across. It got to be very more difficult after Arnhem, because the river was the border. The Rhine River was the front line. Before it was easier through France and the Pyrenees to smuggle them back. Anyway, another thing which was being going on in the underground there is we were sabotaging the highway from Amsterdam to Arnhem with nail-like objects. I got a little thing of it here, which I made out of a paperclip, but it had that form. No matter how it falls when you drive over it, you'll be sure to get a spike in your nail. That didn't last very long.
And what did you do about those?
I was only on the boundary. I was fairly young still. I didn't actively do much. So the Germans didn't like that very much, and they put Dutch people along the highway every 100 meters in charge of that highway, and if anybody got a flat tire there, they were shot. So we had to stop this business. That was the usual German action. So as the war wore on, there was much more difficulty getting information. First they cut the phones, then they cut electricity, and when they cut electricity, I found out they came to the house and sealed up our meter box. And I was suspicious of that, but I soon figured it out. The transmitter, the Dutch long-wave transmitter, called Hilversum 2, was located in town, and the Dutch were using, and the Germans were using for propaganda. And although the power was cut to the whole population, they obviously had power. And then we found out that in the harbor, because this was a fishing village, there was a generating barge generating power for the transmitter, and they were transmitting it through the cable in our street, which was the main street of the town. So I said, okay, there must be power, and that's why they sealed it. So I pried open the seals, and I have the seals here still, which are pried open, knowing that the Germans wouldn't ever inspect their own seals, if you couldn't see that it was pried open. Pried open the seals, and they had just taken out the main house fuses. So I put one strand of lamp wire, I opened up a wire, put one strand in there. I put a coin below all the house fuses, the normal fuses, and I had a short-circuited plug in my pocket. If the Germans ever came to check, I knew they wouldn't open their seal. They would only check with a voltmeter to see if there was any voltage. And they came several times, and every time they came, I saw them come in, I shoved the short-circuited plug in the nearest outlet and blew this little wire I put in there. Then I put it back in again. So we had electricity till the end, and we could listen to the radio till the end when nobody else could.
How did you learn these electrical skills?
I was going to be an electrical engineer. I was always interested. I tried several things before that. Before I did that, we tried to generate power enough for the radio by me sitting on a bicycle with a 2x4, two 2x4s between the kitchen table and the sink, and I pedaling like mad to generate enough power, but that didn't work. I then tore out the gutters, zinc, and tried to make a battery because it would work on DC, that radio. And that didn't work because I used Bockhofer's chemistry shop for the chemicals, but I made a major mistake, which I now know, now I'm an engineer, what the mistake was. And the batteries were no good I made. So then I started stealing that power from the German army.
And the Buckhovens used those ration coupons to get your food from?
Well, no, I got the food from the place I was later on. Yeah, we even got once a truckload of seedling potatoes about that big delivered to us in the underground. Unbelievable how they managed. And we used to get from the fishery, tiny little fish which were supposed to be thrown back. They were normally fishermen are allowed to catch. They're supposed to throw that back in, you know, for the next generation of fish. We ate those, and we ate tulip bulbs. And of course, tulip bulbs were in the bread, in the whatever bread there was. It was full of tulip bulbs, which gave you terrible gas. It was terrible. Even before that already, before we were in the underground in Amsterdam, you see these ladies on the bicycles, well-dressed ladies who couldn't keep their gas in, you know, because of all the tulip bulbs we were eating, which are also poisonous. Another interesting story, coming back to Amsterdam, was something which I knew the Germans, which made them absolutely furious. Before the war, Holland was on a time of 20 minutes different from Germany, and 40 minutes different from England, from Greenwich. Silly, but that's what they were. When the Germans came in, they changed the time to German time. Germans are big for New Year's Eve. They make a lot of noise at New Year's Eve, shoot off rockets, do whatever they want in a shoot-off gun. At midnight in Amsterdam, New Year's Eve, it was absolutely quiet, not a sound. At 20 minutes past midnight, the Dutch time, midnight, banging garbage cans. The Germans were furious, and there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. Nothing. So we knew how to...
So wagging the tail of the Germans was good fun.
And every time I was asked for directions by German military, I always sent them the wrong way. And as a matter of fact, I knew that, never went the other way. I mean, it didn't help much. You said, oh, that way, and then turn left. I went the other way and asked again. And I don't know. There was German signs all over the place to the hospitals and whatever they had, field hospitals. Anyway, I was going back a little bit. So we, I forgot. Well, yeah, we got enough food. Although I was terribly undernourished, I weighed 87 pounds after the war. I was 19.
How tall were you?
I was about as tall as I was now, 5'10". Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, the schools kept on the report cards each year reported the height of and the weight of the children for the parents, and it was shown after the war that the children who came along who went through the war were 1 inch shorter than they were before the war. Mm-hmm. So. Anyway, whatever that's was.
So what year are we up to now?
Well, we are in 1944, I guess. There isn't much more to tell about that. Oh yeah, they cut off the water too. They cut off the gas, they cut off the telephone, they cut off the water and the electricity. And they put us on a curfew, and you're only allowed to be out 1 hour a day. And to go to the city, to the center of the village. Huizen is a village. To the pump. Well, I discovered another thing. The Germans went letting their water line run dry because there was rust out. There were steel water pipes. So they kept just the tiniest amount of pressure on, not enough to get to a tap. But at the bottom, at the water, where the pipe was coming in from the street, there was a drain. Because in Holland freezes in the winter, and you could drain out all the water in the house. So we put a barrel there, and I opened the drain, and it was slowly dripping all day long, and we had enough water. And it never occurred to me that the water might not be safe for drinking. But we never went to the pump, so we never got exposed that way.
What did you think about your mother and her family that were taken away?
Well, we had many letters from her from the camp, and I have a whole pile of them here. And we knew she was well, and when she went to Theresienstadt, we had great hope.
They came to you under different names?
No, sometimes she used somebody else's riding privileges and used another name, but in general. Oh, they went sent directly to us. We had an address which forwarded it to us. That was the only address who knew where we were. And so my mother was riding, and she didn't get deported to Theresienstadt till September 44, and we were liberated in May 45, so there's a short time span. We had great hopes and heard that Theresienstadt was good and people were being exchanged, which was not true. My father was also trying to arrange for an exchange for us, and there was a so-called Wehrmacht Austauschkommission, which was a German army exchange commission which was reserving Jews for exchange against German citizens. They took in a fee, and they gave you a certificate and say you're being held here and not to be deported because you're held in exchange for German citizens. It was a complete baloney, and all it did is get their money. Well, my father and I paid, and we were registered already in the underground, and that never came to anything.
Did your father's resources of financial or political help to enable you to survive, or how
my
is
father sold off all his jewelry and many other valuables to survive for the war. We paid where we were, although that's not enough ever for saving somebody's life to pay for a room and board. So that was not the motivation for the people keeping us, but we did pay.
You mean you just paid an ordinary amount?
A reasonable, and I have no idea what it was. So we were there in the underground, like I say, and well, the end of the war came along. I guess I can't tell you much more. I listened to the radio. Nobody believed me that I could understand all these languages, and I started to understand almost any language except Slavic. Polish I didn't understand. I knew Danish, I knew Dutch, I couldn't understand. Italian, Spanish, there was very little Spanish, Romanian, and nobody believed me. But I heard in Italian that the Italian had declared war on Germany, after the overthrew Mussolini. They didn't believe me, but I then heard it in German and Dutch, and that was all right. I heard in Romania that Romania had turned and declared war on Germany. They didn't believe me either till they heard it. But I learned all these languages.
You learned English at the time, too?
Oh, I knew English already. I had it at school. As a matter of fact, before the war, I was a good student, but I was poor in languages. But after the war, I knew these languages because I'd done nothing but listen in all these languages. So, but it's simple, because it's always the same. If a new town got mentioned, I marked it on the map, and the words were more or less always the same. These military communiques, that's not a fluency in a language, to understand these military communiques after a while from one language to another. You got it. Anyway.
During this time, were you ever really fearful for your safety and your father's safety?
Yes. There are several times the Germans made a sweep through town. We were always warned in advance, because the underground had very good connections. We were warned in advance, and I had great time with my father, who didn't understand this, to not go to bed that night, because they felt the beds to see if there were beds warm more than people were visible in the house. So we were sleeping in chairs. And they came, and we could hear the dog's bark come closer and closer and closer. And they searched the house, and we were under the floor. There was a trap under the floor, as a matter of fact, to get to these pipes, which I was talking about. Like a crawl space in California. You can get under the floor, except this was a trap door underneath the living room carpet. So we were under there all night, lying in the dirt, while the Germans searched all over town.
Were you frightened?
Well, yeah, I knew this caper was the electricity. They would shoot me if they found out. Death penalty of stealing German army stuff.
Were there many other hidden people in this town that you knew of?
Yeah, I knew several others. I didn't know exactly where they lived, but I knew several others, yes.
Were they Jews?
Yes. One of them, strange enough, used to be a taxi driver, and he was very proud that he had chauffeured around the cardinal, an archbishop. He thought, I didn't think that was very, very funny, but he thought that was funny. Anyway, but as a matter of fact, a child was born. His wife had a child in the underground. It was born in a regular hospital, and they managed to hide the fact, and they went right back in hiding again. So, yes. Well, when the war came to the end, at the end, we really had no food, and nobody in Holland had any food. It was terrible.
Because there hadn't been any planting that year?
Or what?
Everything.
First of all, we cut off. That part of Holland was cut off. The Allies just marched. They had already crossed the Rhine. They were very close to Berlin. And they had, this part was Holland cut off, and they left it. Because there was so many German soldiers, and they didn't bother with them. So we were in dire hunger. It was terrible. And it was so bad that finally, through the Swedish Red Cross, the Germans allowed American bomber planes to come fly over extremely low and drop food out of open bomb doors out on the field, and the Germans went shooting at them.
When was this?
2 or 3 days before VE Day, in May 45. As a matter of fact, the food was never distributed till after the war. It was so close to the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, I know of a tragic instance. There were sea rations and cookies, these dried cookies. Some guy ate so many of them, was so hungry, and then drank water. His stomach died. Yeah. So you had to be extremely careful to be renourished. So anyway, the war was coming to a close.
And you knew that because you listened to the radio.
I listened to radio. It's just the last 2 days I had no power. They cut the power off the transmitter, stopped transmitting. As a matter of fact, we came out from the underground, put on our orange insignia, partisan orange band, and went up to the German transmitter, and the man had to hand over all the Dutch girls which were hiding in there who had had affairs with the Germans. Now the Germans went about to do that, and they said, if you don't go back, we shoot. And we went back in a hurry because we had no arms.
Why did you do this?
Because the German army had surrendered in Holland. This was 1 day before VE Day. The German army had surrendered, and so we demanded the girls. And we wanted to shave their hair. That's what we did. So they wouldn't let us have them, and told us to go back and shoot. The next day we got them and shaved all their hair off.
Were those girls there under their own free will, or were
they had taken refuge with the Germans because they knew what would happen to them, the ones who had played with the Germans. So the next day they realized it, and they surrendered, and the Canadian came. This was the Canadian Army's zone. They came in, rolling in with a tank. I was outside. We were rounding up Nazis.
What Canadian brigade or?
Don't know. We were rounding up Nazis, and when I saw the first tank approach, so I rode in on the top of the first tank, which was a great experience. Rode in. They wanted to know the way to the harbor. So I showed them to the harbor, and I couldn't understand why they left the German soldiers with their arms stand alongside the road.
But no one was shooting?
No, they had surrendered. But they didn't take them prisoners. I figured they scoop them all up and put them in prisoner camp, but they didn't. And they didn't for a week, because they were afraid of that they all get killed if they disarmed them, and the Dutch population would have killed them all. So they let them keep their arms till they got them orderly in a prisoner of war camp. Anyway, so we drove up to the harbor, and then I told the guy, I said, I haven't heard any news for 2 or 3 days. So he let me listen on his earphones to the BBC. And I heard, well, fantastic things, how Mussolini was strung up in Milan on his feet, and and this army division had surrendered, and it was finished. It was VE Day. And then suddenly he got a call that a division of SS Skull, what do you call it, Totenkopf, Skull, the fighting SS in the previous village was refusing to surrender and had cut down trees and blocked the road. So they immediately had to turn around and go back, and then they surrendered. The tanks left right away, I had to get off. We went back to Amsterdam.
Were you thinking about your mother this time?
Yeah. We went back to Amsterdam and found a place to live in the underground hospital. They had maintained a hospital in Amsterdam for the underground forces if they got hurt. And we stayed there for a couple of days, weeks. And then I heard that a couple from Theresienstadt had made it back to Amsterdam and staying in a hotel downtown. I went to them and they knew my mother, so I knew she was fine. They knew she was fine. So I knew she was fine.
Tell me how you felt when you and your father found this out.
So glad, I tell you. And we were still living kind of like dogs too, because we were living, our apartment was gone. We were living upstairs. They had separate rooms for all the maids for the apartments. They were living upstairs. We had got one of those rooms. We were cooking on a hot plate on top of a toilet seat. It was a mess. But anyway, I knew she was safe. And I also knew from another couple who had come back from Auschwitz that my uncle was one of 3 people in Auschwitz left behind. My uncle, my father's brother, too sick to be evacuated when the Russians approached and was liberated by the Russians and turned in to the hospital in town in Poland. He was the camp doctor, my uncle, Arthur Meyer. He lived in Germany. He went immediately in 1933, he went to France, Paris, Metz first. His wife was from Metz and had French citizenship. When after the First World War the Alsace became French again. Then he went to Paris, and when the Germans came he went to Lyon, and that's where he ran into Barbie and was sent to Auschwitz. He became the camp doctor, and he was found asleep one day at his desk, and they put him at hard labor. He developed TB, and he was so sick that they couldn't evacuate him. All the others were force-marched out of Auschwitz. So we tried to find out. We wrote to the hospital in Poland. We wrote to the Polish Red Cross. Never got any answer to any of our letters. He no doubt died soon after getting to the hospital, but he at least had the satisfaction of knowing that he was liberated.
Tell us about your experience as your mother came back to Amsterdam.
Well, she wrote us a letter from Theresienstadt, which didn't arrive till after she got back. She wrote us a letter from when she arrived in Holland, which didn't get to us till after we were back. She didn't know we were alive, but we knew she was alive. So one evening, we were at the neighbors, and she phoned those people, which were our contact, and we were right there. So she told us she was at the bridge. I heard her say, Bellacher Brug. It's a bridge at the outskirts.
What did you feel like when you heard her voice?
Well,
this
we
was
so
2
happy,
years.
but we knew she was coming.
Uh-huh.
We just rushed out on our bicycle to meet her, and that was just wonderful.
How did she look?
She looked all right. Her values on life had changed a lot. You know, she wasn't ashamed of anything anymore. I used to remember I got quite upset. I was very prudish. She'd pick up a skirt, and if she had an itch and so she had a flea from like in a camp, pick up a skirt and itch herself, and I didn't like these things. But
Well, you mean she wasn't as refined as you had remembered?
no, she had gone through hell. It was bed bugs and everything. You know, she probably taught you about that. Every night the bed bugs when you get into bed. So anyway, so that was the end of the war for us. We were given an apartment very quickly, and
you were well, except hungry.
Hungry. I got double ration being in the underground, and I went to the church to eat from the soup kitchen. So I gave my double rations to my father, who was also undernourished, and I ate at the soup kitchen in the church. So
all 3 of you were healthy.
After the war, essentially.
That's
yes.
wonderful.
Essentially, we were healthy. And we soon got much better. And but they decided this was it. There's another strange story to tell you. When the Germans invaded Holland, my father wanted then to leave and cross over to England without any papers. He had a car. It was a yellow canary, yellow Packard convertible. Everybody in Holland knew his car because of the canary yellow color. And it was in storage, which it was every year. He only took it out of storage and paid the license fee in the summer months and saved it in the winter when he didn't need it. He took it out, he ordered it out, although it wasn't licensed, it was too early, in May 40 when they invaded. He took it out and we were going to drive, but it was too late. It never even got out. That car, the Germans never found. After the war, he took it out and we were the only people who had a car.
Was there any gasoline?
Well, there was very little of that. But we only had the car for 2 days before Prince Bernhard, who is the father of the present queen, who was then the husband of the Crown Princess Juliana, who later became queen. He was the head of the underground forces, but he was in England. He came back, and they confiscated the car after 2 days for his staff car. Well, it's a funny story because we saved it from the Germans during the whole war, and 2 days after the war, the Dutch took it. Now, my father got very mad when he heard reports how this commander of the Dutch underground forces had been seen with his girlfriend taking trips to Switzerland with our car. So he went to court, and they found that the confiscation was done illegally, and he got it back again with compensation. So we had that car again, which we then sold when we went to the States. Made money on it, sold it for more than we got it. So that's a funny story about a car, huh?
That's wonderful.
I mean, weird things happened.
Two. Okay, Jerry.
Okay, I was telling you at the end of the war, we were waiting and hoping to have family come back and friends, but nobody came back from Auschwitz or any of the other camp. As a matter of fact, of the people in my class in the Jewish high school, I don't remember any of them coming back, except myself, who was in the underground.
What was the name of that high school?
It was called the Jewish high school.
The Jewish
Lyceum, actually, Lyceum.
In Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam. It was the only Jewish high school, where all Jews from all the public schools had to go to. So, I remember one day walking to that high school, come back to that high school, with my Jewish star on a bridge. I was walking on the wrong side of the street, and a German officer was walking. See, I was walking on the left side instead of the right side. German officer was walking, and we went on a straight collision course. I wouldn't walk out of his way. I wouldn't get out of his way, so he hit me. He could have shot me. He hit me, but I had my pride too. I wasn't going to deviate from my walk for a German officer. You know. Didn't do me any good. But maybe it helped my spirits.
Maybe it did.
So, anyway, after the war, my parents had enough and wanted to go to the United States. My father's brother, the one we smuggled into Holland, and he got out just before the war on the last ship. He was in Chicago. My mother's sister was in New York. My cousin, the one whose little picture you saw, a little boy on the photo, he had come over and he told us we got to get out of here and we got to go to the States. So we went to the States. I didn't want to go. I was studying at the University of Delft at that time. I'd graduated from high school. I was top of my class, although I'd only spent there 3 months in the last year. And I went to Delft and I spent about 3 months there. and got into trouble because after the war, my father was put in charge by the Dutch government, although he was supposedly a German citizen, which we weren't really, of restituting a British company in Holland, a branch of British company in Holland, which the Germans had taken away, to restitute it back to the British. And they liked him so much that they wanted him to buy out the whole company in England and for me to go into that business. But I didn't want to. It was a grinding wheel. I was an electrical engineer. They wanted me to change to ceramics engineering or chemical engineering. I didn't want to. I didn't care. So we went on a trip to England to look the place over. And
you immediately had resources right after the war, then?
We got some of our stuff back, yeah. So, and my father was then employed by the Dutch government as a government official. Although we were supposedly, like I said, supposedly German. Although, frankly, my father, after the start of the war, when his German passport was stamped as a J, sent it back to the German consulate in Amsterdam before they invaded and told him to go to hell. To kiss his ass, as a matter of fact, he said. Which, luckily, nobody remembered when the Germans came in. But we didn't have a passport, and we were officially denaturalized. In the when this was reported back to Germany, we were denaturalized, so we were stateless. And I had a Dutch stateless passport. Anyway, I got off the track. Yes, so I was a student in Delft, and although they never checked who attended lectures, that was completely voluntary, but I did. Most people didn't. They read the notes. The laboratory had to be carefully organized because there was only so much laboratory thing, and I had several laboratories, tanks of material, all kind of things. So I wrote a letter to my professors and say I had to reschedule my laboratory because I was sick in Amsterdam. Well, the next day we flew to England. I wasn't sick at all. And we crashed with a KLM airliner.
Where was the crash?
The crash was near London, approaching Croydon Airport, and we crashed in a forest, thin, young pine forest, and luckily we survived, all of us. I, as a matter of fact, was instrumental in getting people out. I dragged the pilot out with both broken legs and arms. The whole cockpit was ripped open. I unloaded much of the luggage. Part of the reason was that my mother wouldn't travel without her jewelry, and it wasn't allowed to be taken out, the jewelry, out of Holland.
Where did she get her jewelry?
She got it back again. It was, people hid it for her, kept it for her. And you weren't allowed to take anything valuable out because there was money, currency restrictions, and jewelry could be turned into money. So, but she had it anyway, so I unloaded the whole goddamn luggage to get to her suitcase. So anyway, I dragged the pilot out, and several other people who were all in shock. And like usual, Murphy's Law, when we tried to get out the door in the back, it was a DC-3 Dakota. There was a pine tree right in front of the door. We had to cross all the branches. Murphy's Law. Anyway, there were several people hurting, broken legs, bleeding. There were 2 military doctors, because the government was still a military government in London, hadn't completely transferred back after liberation to Hague yet. 2 doctors there in uniform wouldn't do anything. I said, isn't there anybody a doctor around here? So they came like little children. Yes, we are. I said, well, why don't you do something? And then they got busy. Now, you'd think a military doctor would be trained to... But anyway, so there was also a fire. There was the engines had blown off, and there was a fuel line leaking, and the whole right wing fuel tank had drained onto this forest floor, and on the left side there was a flame shooting out, which hit the ground, and there was a circle burning. I climbed up against the cockpit, got a fire extinguisher, ripped my clothes, which KLM paid me 10 guilders for. And got the fire out. I was then offered a scholarship at the University of London for preventing a forest fire. So anyway, this got in the paper. In Delft, at my university, one of our students prevented a forest fire, was in an air crash. So when I came back, my professors didn't think it was funny because I said I was sick in Amsterdam. And I got in the newspaper the next day. So I'd been plain lying, and I got caught. So
How long was it before you went to the United States?
we were supposed to fly to the United States. We had an immigration visa which expired around Christmas, I think New Year's.
How did you get that?
To the United States?
No, the immigration visa.
Oh, we applied for it, and we got it eventually. We waited a while. As a matter of fact, the immigration visa expired, and my parents wouldn't go on a plane again. So we had to try to find a ship, and the nearest ship we could find was from Sweden to New York on the Gripshorn, which in the war was a troop transport ship. And as a matter of fact, we left just in time because you had to have left the last harbor before the visa expired. The visa was expired by the time we arrived in New York, but that didn't matter as long as we were in the high seas. So we got into New York.
Great.
And that was January 47.
Good.
I then went to Columbia University. Didn't know what the hell was going on there. And I was on extension. And I took a full load because I didn't know what it meant. Although they told me I couldn't take more than half a load, I took a full load. By the midterm, they found out I was taking twice as many courses as I should and told me to drop them. I said, why should I drop them? I had a midterm a grade already of B average. So they let me stay on. Then, that was Columbia University. So then they wanted me to, in the regular course, and I had to take an admission exam, which was mostly English. Well, although I was allowed to have 100 points less, Americans were supposed to have 600 points, foreign students 500 points, and I didn't make 500 points. So they wouldn't admit me. I said, why aren't you admitting me? I'm taking a full course in engineering, and I have more than a B average.
You just hadn't read all those books.
I didn't, well, yeah, I didn't know enough
All that
English.
literature.
I sweated to get I had courses in mechanics, thermodynamics, and the English was my problem to writing reports. Oh, I worked hard. Anyway, they admitted me. But then we were fed up with New York weather. We took a trip across country in the car to Los Angeles, and my father said, you're not going back again. So I applied at SC, and I applied for for junior standing. And I talked directly to the director of engineering, and he says, you only had 3 months in Holland, and you had 1 semester at Columbia. How can I get you junior standing? I said, I've had all this in high school. And he said, I don't believe you. I said, I'll show you. So he admitted me provisionally with junior standing, and he said, I'll see you at the end of the term, and you'll be in trouble. So I had a straight A at the end of the term.
Good.
So I never had any problem with the director of admission again. As a matter of fact, I graduated in '49 as top student in engineering.
Great.
After that, I went to Caltech, where I wasn't top student anymore because there were many more bright people there, and got a master's in electrical engineering. I then went on 2 more years for a PhD, which I did not get because I never got a thesis written. The Korean War got involved. It's too complicated to explain to you, but the equipment I was working on was wanted for war effort, and I couldn't get on it, and I couldn't get written. And there was also some anti-Semitism there. The head of the department didn't want me to get a PhD. And he told me frankly that I would never get a PhD. I wasn't the right person for it. Now the rest of the faculty told me, don't listen to him. We all be there, which normally are not there when your examination, for doctorate examination, we be there and you pass. But I got a job. I became a U.S. citizen then. I got a job, and I didn't even want to go back. I had a child already by that time, my oldest son. I was married.
Great. Thank you so much for telling us your story.
That's it. So, this is the Jewish star, which we all had to wear. It says Yod, which is Jewish Jew in Dutch, and the simulated Hebrew letters. The color is yellow because yellow is the color of shame. That's what the Germans made us all wear on every outer garment. This is the Jewish star we had to wear on all outer garments. It says the Dutch word for Jew, Yod, and it's in simulated Hebrew letters. Yellow is the color of shame, and that's why it was picked that way. All, like I said, all outer garments had to have that on there.
And
We took all these off when we were in the underground.
from when to when did you have to wear that?
I'm not sure, probably about 42 till we went in the underground, 43. They also stamped our papers with a J, our identity papers. This is an identity card of mine issued by the Jewish Council in Amsterdam, saying that I worked as aide in the help for departing, meaning deportees. I never did work for them, but a classmate of mine was a nephew of the head of the Jewish Council, and that's how I got the paper.
When was that?
That was issued in April of 43. It was supposed to help me and not get arrested.
In Amsterdam?
In Amsterdam.
Okay.
That's before we went in the underground. Well, we went in the underground actually in April 43, so I didn't use it ever. This is a letter from 28th of November 43, when we were already in the underground, issued by the so-called Austauschkommission Wehrmacht, which means Exchange Commission of the German Army, which was run by a Jewish fellow named Weintraub. It cost 200 guilders to get this certificate, and it said that we were being held in exchange for German citizens abroad for an exchange thing through the Red Cross. The whole thing was a complete sham. There was never such an exchange, and this piece of paper never helped anybody. But we were already in the underground, but they got their 200 guilders for each of us.
How much is 200 guilders in the current?
In those days, there were 2.5 guilders to $1 before the war. During the war, who knows? 2.5 guilders. So it's
$500.
no, the other way
7.
around. No, the other way around.
Oh, less.
It's less than $100. It's $80, I guess. Okay, that's an identity card from a person in Amsterdam who had this identity card stolen, and my father's picture was stuck on top of his picture. So this is a real identity card, just the picture was changed. The fingerprint on the other side is the man's fingerprint. The fellow who did it for us was arrested a week later and shot by the Germans. It was a dangerous card to have, identity card to have, because it wouldn't check with the register, so it could never be. If you ever were arrested, it was all right while walking and showing to somebody, but it wasn't all right if you were arrested and they were following up, because it wouldn't match. Okay. This is a fake identity card, which was issued to me by the underground. It gives me the same last name as my father, but my regular first name. It's my birthday, and I was made a year younger because that would avoid me having to get caught in the German forced labor. I was too young for that. The birthplace was declared to be Surabaya, Dutch East Indies, because they had no contact, they couldn't check there. So it's a good fake. This is an article in Los Angeles Times of July 20th, 89, about the man in Huizen who first helped us and saved us and several other Jewish people there. His name is Bert Bockhofer. At that time, he just became American citizenship. He's a recognized rescuer, and he was extremely good to us.
When you were in
Huizen, in the underground. He saved us in the beginning, and then we went somewhere else. Yeah, that is a piece of paper with a photo of my father issued by the police in Huizen, saying that during the Allied landing at Arnhem, my father was evacuated and lost his identity papers and can't find them anywhere, and they can have no contact with the city of Arnhem because of Allied occupations, but they believe this to be true fact. This was much better than the identity card he had before, because that could be checked and it didn't fit. So this was safer.
Did it help him?
Hmm?
Did it help him?
No,
Did
he never had
use
to
it?
show it. We never were challenged by the Germans. They never found us. I don't know if it would have helped. Who knows? This is a letter from the commander, captain of the Dutch interior forces, being the partisans, saying that to have us, although my father has a German accent, to leave him go. He was a reliable person. There was one underneath that saying the same thing for me, except the Dutch accent, the German accent, because I didn't have one.
When was
So
that?
to let us go. It was dated May 10th, 1945, VE Day. This is a seal of the electric box, which I explained about when I stole power from the German army. This they had put on and sealed it after they disconnected our power, and I reconnected it again. It goes together very nicely. You can't see that it's broken. This is a well-worn map of Europe, which we use daily when we listen to the BBC and the American Forces Network, and well, it was called Expeditionary Forces, Allied Expeditionary Force Network, and followed the battles in the various fronts. Here's the Eastern Front, how it slowly moved back towards Berlin. Here's the Western Front after the invasion and liberation of France and getting into Germany. We followed that daily and marked it up. If the Germans had found us, we would have been in deep, deep trouble. More than trouble.